I welcome to this podcast with one of the uh, veterans and one of the movers and shakers of the semiconductor industry in India, Mr. Raja Manickam, IVP Semiconductors. My name is PVG Menon. I've also been in this industry for a while, uh, looked at various parts of it. And today we will explore both Raja's own journey as well as what is the structure of the semiconductor industry, which way are we headed, and based on Raja's experience in India and globally, what are some of his views on this industry and how to take it forward. So, Raja, welcome. And for our audience, why don't you give a little bit of your journey before we get into the substantive part of this conversation?
Thank you, PVJ. It's been a pleasure. I mean, we know each other for a long time, and I'm really glad that 2025 we're actually seeing action on the ground, right? That's right, electronics and semiconductor particular. I used to say that I don't think it's going to happen in our lifetime. I'm so happy to see that actually things are moving, and it's a wonderful time to be in, and to participate with veterans like us who are like dreaming about this for the last many years. I think it's a happy day for us.
20 years is right, Raja. I remember 2005 with Sem India. That's where the journey started. And yeah, we've known each other for a very long time.
Yes.
So, you know, let's get into the substantive part, Raja. You've been in this industry, earlier in the US, and then you started Tessol, and now IVP Semiconductors. So, why don't you give me a bit of a vision for IVP? What made you come into that? And also, from running, I know you since your Tessol days, which was services and testing, and now this is a transition to a product company. So, a little bit about that transition as well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this whole journey started 2004. I actually wanted to start a manufacturing in India in those days, right? Yeah, that's my bigger story. But as the time was not ripe, and people pushed me towards becoming a service. And in fact, that's all. The idea was to create the ecosystem for startups in India. But at that time there was not enough startups. There's no funding behind the startups as well. So I took, like most people did, I become a service company, servicing the usual suspects, with the top 10 party semiconductor companies. So there is always a time, right? Families right to do certain things. So it was a good stepping stone for me to figure out how to work in India and so on, and because of the tremendous talent we have. Pretty much, we took fresh grads and make them world class, test engineers to start with. I mean, today I would say that I'm very proud to say that any big company, any top company, whether US, European, Korean, or Japanese or Taiwanese, you will see a test engineer somebody,
Wow.
right? I mean, it takes a lot of, and I take a lot of pride in that. Uh, and primarily it's because, we have the hunger to learn. And also I think, the learning curve of our engineering people is tremendously fast. All you need is, mentors and management. So it was an excellent journey that I had. And, recently you must have heard that it also, private equity is interested in or buying them. And they actually valued at a very, very significant price as well, which also adds to the whole situation in India today. Is semiconductor, you can make money out of it. There's investments, or people lining up to come into it. So I think that that's all, in a way, right, was a building block to where we are, where it works.
Raja, can I interrupt you for just a sec before you get into the IDP? Prior to Tessol, you had worked in Silicon Valley, you had worked in Southeast Asia. What was the culture change? 2004, things were very different. How did you, what struck you the most when you did that transition?
Yeah, entrepreneurs need to have some amount of naivety and foolishness, right? Because if you know everything, right, you'll be scared, right? So a lot of things I didn't know, right, when I came. And of course, I had some great people, right? Birpan is one of them. He was a Whopper guy. and my team, that guys together. So I think the transition was in Silicon Valley, and the ecosystem was already there, and there were a lot of entrepreneurs doing little things, right? Somebody will do a deposition equipment, somebody will do failure analysis. There was all of these experts they were on there, right, for the chip business, building and chip and so on. Whereas here we didn't have, right? So the idea was that you see TESOP as a seed to proliferate this kind of uh, services in order for the startups to come and use and all that. We have failure analysis. We were one of the first companies to have FIB, right? Focus on being to do surgery on chips, right?
I remember, I mean, I was running ISA at that time,
Yes.
and it was very design heavy.
Yes.
And you were the first company coming in talking manufacturing. So it was, I remember those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think it will be there was a binary effort in that sense. And I can also tell you, I tried to raise money from people in India. I could not raise at all. And fortunately for me, some of the big American companies like Applied, in Mopto Majors, and Jafco and so on, they all fucked with me. So I think, and now, as you can see, there's a lot more, people wanting to in the ecosystem might be. So I think, it's going to grow.
And the transition to IVP, what was the vision there?
Yeah, of course, right? When I started the company, I was 48, right? So now you guys come how old I am, right? So it's like 21 years since, right? Now, so I always felt that we need to control our own destiny, right? We meaning, we have a market now. India has a market, the significant market. We have the demography for aspirations to consume a lot of the quality of life, so on. And I saw that, 100%, right, of chips were imported, as you know, today in India. And I said, we need to control our own destiny. We're a nation of service to others, right? Which we've done a good job and learned a lot from there, right? And I said, look, let's start making our own product. The prime minister's the industry minister talking about we want to be a product nation, right? This was something that I wanted to do, many years ago. And again, right now, I felt that at this stage of my life, right, the all the experience that I have, I need to really be of the product. And so I was determined to build a product company, and that's how IVP is a fabulous product company.
Um, so, Raja, shifting gears, from a structural standpoint on the industry, um, here, I mean, on a lighter note, I mean, about the end of Moore's Law, I was at a conference in ISC and somebody made this remark that there are more conferences on the end of Moore's Law, but Moore's Law still goes on. So, but having said that, there is an increasing realization that innovation in the future is going to come from packaging rather than from geometry, shrink, or processing programs. Um, Given your very long experience with the packaging industry, what is your take on this? And the related question is, we have in India a large number of OSATs coming on. Some are already commissioned. There are mega OSATs, the Micron and the Tata one, the CG. What is your standpoint on what does India need to do, given the large investments, the packaging capacity in India? What does India need to do? Two parts to the question. One is your analysis from a structural point of view of future innovations we driven the packaging. And second, with India's considerable investments in packaging, which way do you think that should be oriented?
No, I think it's a great question. I'm a big believer that the next 10, 20 years, innovation in the packaging is going to be the big thing, right? For a few reasons, right? If you look at the last 20, 30 years, right? There was tremendous innovation in the process, the fab process and so on. And kind of, packaging was an afterthought, right? It's just packaging is basically interconnect, right? To take from your die to the real world, right? So, and there was nothing much done, right, in that decade. And like you said, right, Moore's law and stuff like that. So people start to say, hey, where do you get the best bang for the buck? And then so people start to look at this on the packaging side. Fortunately for us, right, my view, packaging is at the very innovation in packaging is at a very early stage. Right? Maybe maybe a couple of years, right? People have been dabbled in, and of course uh, KSMC's CoWAS and a very similar thing from Intel. Other than that, right, we are the level playing field. So I think for India to get into the packaging part of it and really put a lot of muscle behind it. When I say muscle, it would one the intellectual property that may happen on people. I think we could take some leadership position in the package.
If I can just interrupt you for a minute, I mean, the world is now talking about wafer slack icing and things like that. A lot of the plants in India are still focusing on legacy pack. So, from that standpoint, is there a different read of the market? Because, you know, Taiwan, Philippines, even Malaysia are going in one direction. We seem to be going in a slightly different direction. And that's the basic point. Of course, the microns of the world will always invest into a parts package.
No, I think the big difference is right. As I said, right, it's we in the year, we're pretty much our ground sheet, right? We don't have any significant packaging capability. It's one. We have a lot of people, Indian diaspora, working everywhere, right, in Asia.
Suprathas, we have
Right.
tapped into that.
Yeah. So I think we have talent which is set up in here that you need to bring them in. But also a believer that we need to learn how to walk before we walk. Right? Okay. And learn how to crawl before we walk, and right. So I think and also the other thing you got to remember is even if you look at advanced packaging, heterogeneous packaging, there is a certain level of interconnect you do in a very sophisticated level. But finally, when you bring it out to the board, you're still doing either flip chip or wire bond, right? So that's what we are focusing on today, right? If it could go your sense, right? And even when I was in Tata, that's what I was pushing for is, hey, let's get this thing, boy. And, in packaging also, right? In this, like manufacturing, any manufacturing, you could do things in the lab and, prove something. But getting into manufacturing and, consistently able to produce and the yields and, in semiconductor, you got to have, 95 and above.
Correct.
Or maybe even 99. Otherwise, people will not give you wafer anyway. So I think about that part of it, we need to get our focus on. And I think we're doing the right thing. 2 to 3 years, get our act together in terms of building factories, ability to pipe clean the process and so on. While I think, what I think is missing in that sense is that the thousands of crores of money that is being spent, right? You don't need to spend all of it in this, right? In the old technology and so on. Maybe half or maybe even 70% of that you can start doing, setting up the pilot lines or demo lines or just experimenting some of that, right? Which is not going to give you a return to the next 4 to 5 years. Right?
So they fair a lot of these players are starting with pilot lines, almost everyone. So equipment characterization, all of that is happening.
Yeah. Pilot line on the legacy stuff.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, we should start tinkering with, some of this advanced packaging.
Right.
And the issue I see is this, right? Businessmen are running companies, right? And like, the good old days, and even in the US, right? I'm a believer that semiconductor is built by techies with passion.
Right. There's a lot of zeros now at the bill.
Yeah, because you look at this, right? Whether it's Qualcomm or Broadcom, Xilinx or Intel, every one of these companies were started by the techies with a passion, right? Some of them, like Jensen and all that, are still there, right? Was it started by business people? Matters, right? In India, we tend to fund the business people to go and do a very techie stuff, right? So they both think different. So the business people look at ROI and IRR. So my point is this, right? If we really want to get into higher advanced packaging, it needs a different metric. Okay? But I think we are at the right path. I'm a little bit impatient, maybe, but I think we'll need that.
Okay. So one quick comment and takeaway, if you will, what you say is what we refer to as ISM 1.0. We did the pipe cleaning, as you call it, with legacy, and the new incentive policy, you're suggesting strongly that at least start investing into at least a pilot line on advanced packaging, if not going the whole hog and funding some of those.
Absolutely. And I think, I read an article this morning that the IT Minister Vaishnu was also talking about this, where there's a lot of, when I say, innovation of any packaging, a lot of material
True.
the level, kind of the innovation is happening there, right? People are really thinking about, silicon versus other things and so on. We're looking at glass substrates for it as a carrier. So many different things are now popping up, right? And so, that investment we need to do in order to understand and build stuff.
So that leads me to the question, is it time to start thinking in terms of multidisciplinary research efforts, uh, maybe in one of the newer IITs, probably, which are a little more hungry?
See, people people think that when you say semiconductor, right? It's an electrical product, right? It's an electrical product, and finally, as the electricity knows, packaging is all mechanical and chemical, more mechanical than correct, right? And when you go to the fab, it's mostly chemical with a little bit of optical and something. So it's really nothing to do with electrical. Right? So what you talk about is, finally you test it, right? You design it with electrical, electronics people. You test it with electronics people, but in between is all done by mechanical and chemist, right? So this is where I think we haven't figured this out really. The renovation is going to come from physics. It's going to come from mechanical vehicle, thermal, right? Thermal is a huge
True.
parameter for CMOS, right? And the size of transistor and so forth. So I think we need to really figure out, right? It's not the ECE guys are going to do this. They'll design, tools, right? We can always design a virtual wall. But when you make this, right, this is where the mechanical guys come in play very significantly, and physics. So certainly it's a multidisciplinary effort. And I'm even more enthusiastic about this because India traditionally has been very good physics and material science people.
Right.
So we have a huge opportunity here.
Okay, let me shift gears a bit and get into the fabless industry now. And, Raja, my observation is that over the last, certainly a decade, the semiconductor product industry has begun to disaggregate. In the past, you had, the Intels, the Qualcomms, Pediatrics, they had published roadmaps. If you were a product company, you went in and hypothetically, you would go to your favorite semiconductor supplier. He would say, you go with a list of 10 features, and he would say, listen, I'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and give you 7 and 8, but the rest you have to wait until my next chick comes out 2 years from now. And again, if you're in the hyper competitive consumer space, the Apples of the world, the Samsungs of the world, you can't wait that much because the competition is nipping at your ankles. And it started, I think, the consumer guys, but then the cloud guys, the Googles, anyone who needed high performance compute said, why can't we do our own chips? And that industry has disaggregated. Today, custom silicon, quite a few people doing. You've seen the industry evolve. So where does this leave traditional semiconductor models? Because if you were doing custom silicon, you would say, hey, these guys go and get a processor from ARM, they get memory from Rambus, they get everything else from, we know the list of suppliers. So go to DNR, you'll get the list, pick them, and you go to TSMC and fabricate, and you go to Amcor or someone else and build the packaging. Once this model disaggregates, where does it leave traditional semiconductor companies, the Qualcomm? I mean, I'm leaving the x86 out because they are their own specs. But where does this leave the Qualcomms, the MediaTeks of the world, who are focused on still, if you will, a legacy business model? I don't know if you agree with me.
I absolutely agree with you, right? IVP, right? And fabless chip company. And we have aspirations to become big, right? Now, I started the company in 2024, right? Certainly, the companies that started in 1990 or 85 and versus 30 years later, the business model, engagement model is completely different. You're absolutely right. I think uh, the incumbents, right, the legacy players, they're so used to building this box, right? They say, okay, you guys go and figure out it. I'll give you this, so you guys go figure out and I'll do this. Whereas people like us, right, were new, right? We have an opportunity here where we will work very closely with the customers, the end customers, and do things, build semiconductors for them, which will have the best features and performance and for them, right? So I think gone are the days, and except for memory, right, where you still need hundreds of millions of parts, gone are the days where you'll have one single, DC-DC converter, which is going to sell, 100 million units a year. I don't think so. So I think, it's going to be a lot more nuanced, disintegrated. That's one. Second thing is even the manufacturing, right? You know, we have built scale, right? We said, look, you need to have 100,000 wafers per month in order to break even, to make money in a family. Because it is like, mega, bigger, right? True. Right? Super scale everything, right? And guess what? We've come to a point where utilization of this capacity is more of people what they're trying to do in those part of companies versus actually innovating the product itself. So I think there's going to be disintegration in terms of the capacity, how you build the part as well. So and this again, I think would be an advantage for India. We may not have in one location or we have 10 fabs or something. We don't need to. So we will be like, there'll be a power fab, let's say, Padagon or something. That could be, an RF fab somewhere, right? Focused on silicon germanium type of products. We don't be default power amplifiers. And, so we will have a lot of these variations that, and the idea will be, it will be easier to fill up a 8-inch fab, right? With MOSFETs rather than trying to build a 12-inch and so on, right? So I think there's a whole business model is going to change in that sense, and you're going to get closer and closer to where manufacturing is going to be positioned where the customer wants to be, where you define the palette. So I think we are going to kind of uh, break that silos. You're going to fab as a business by its own. I think there's going to be a lot more captive fabs, or like place like Tata probably, right, will have a stake in their fab, the Tata products in a foundry part. I don't think it become a pure from that. No.
This is very interesting. I'm going to take a minute to understand this a little better because traditionally the foundry model plus on been about volume. And you have 50,000 wafers a month, 100,000 wafers a month. And it's sort of, if I may be permitted to say that, it sort of mirrors the airline model where, let's say between Bombay and Delhi, you have one A320 going every half an hour, and your objective is how do I fill up all those seats? What you're saying is that monolithic foundry model is breaking.
Yes.
And I'm very curious about a term you use, which is the captive foundry. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. See, like captive like IDMs, right?
Yeah, I can understand the idea, but that there's Intel A and B with their.
Yeah. So the foundry model, you have today like the TSMCs of the world, like the UT global foundries. the pure play foundries, correct, right? They're not captive to anybody in that sense. But you go nuance a little bit more deeper, right? Probably Nvidia probably takes 50-60% of TSMC's capacity. Apple, right? It's not Apple, yeah, right? So you have, in a way, right? It is captive to somebody. It's not from an equity standpoint or a capacity. Yeah. So from a capacity standpoint, it's already happening. Yeah. So I think more and more of that will happen, right? And it could be that, say IVP in 3 years, right? We want to target our products to the Tata fab that is coming. So we're already targeting PSMC. Right. Because when Tata brings the PSMC
We're already working with
process, right? Yes. So then, yeah, exactly. So we will transfer that, right? Now, it could be a model where my business arrangement will be such that, like, look, out of the 100,000 wafers you're going to make, right? I want to take 15 to 20,000. So, take or pay, some model where it becomes captive to me and also, assures Tata, a significant
He's got a guaranteed of
guaranteed, confidence in the business model, right? So that, we both benefit, right?
right.
So in terms of pricing and so on, right? So it's not going to be, margin stacking in that sense, right? See, today what you see is the product companies own all the margins, right? The product company, right? We do insane margin.
But they do have an investment into IP creation and all.
No, but still, right? I mean, look at the margins they have. That's true. It's 70% AB things they look at Broadcom, right? All these guys, right? And you look at all the suppliers in there, well, they hardly supply. You go to OSAT, right? You're single digit.
Yeah.
Right? Go to EDA, maybe, they make you maybe 40% or so. In fabs, except for TSMC, right? The rest of the guys, it's a touch and move. That they hardly make one. So my point is, there's going to be a rebalance of this. Right. And ultimately it will also lead to practical, reasonable products that will film up. Today, I think it's been very skewed because a few companies that are insanely controlling, and this 10 companies compose 80% of entire growth, right? I think India coming to the table, we will democratize a bit.